Let the light of heaven glow for all the earth to see.
Hello there, how are you? My name is Dixon Wasake. I am a servant of Christ. In my other lifetime, I am a chartered accountant. And if you want to know more about me, you can see the page about me on the website. It's showing at the bottom of your screen. Well, today I would like to talk about faithfulness. Not faithfulness between a man and woman, but faithfulness in a biblical perspective. And I pray that as you listen to this message, God will speak to your heart about faithfulness. So, what is faithfulness? I guess to explain it better, I'm going to turn to the story of David. This is David before he became a king. And I'm taking the story from 1 Samuel chapter 30 from verse 3 to 6. So I'm going to read it for you. So David and his men came to the city, that's Ziklag, and there it was, burned with fire, and their wives, their sons, and their daughters had been taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him lifted up their voices and wept until they had no more power to weep. And David's two wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess and Abigail the widow of Nabal the Carmelite, had been taken captive. Now David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. So, you've just landed into this story, so of course you're wondering what's going on here. There's so much going on. So let me try to break it down for you. You can quickly see a lot of things developing. So David has come from somewhere with his soldiers to a city, and this city is his hometown of Ziklag. So that's the backdrop of the story. He finds that the city has been burned while he was away. The invaders of the city have taken his children, and they've taken the children of they've taken his wife, his two wives. Well, in those days he had two wives, his two wives, and they've taken the children and wives of the city's inhabitants. Okay? So all the men, because at this point the women and children have been taken away, they start crying. So they're crying really loudly. So this is deep grief. This is serious grief. This is the kind of grief you'd find in Africa, where in a funeral you find professional wailers who are crying and they don't even know the person is dead. So this is deep, deep grief, and they cry probably all day until they have no strength left. Then grief eventually turns to anger, as it often does. So the men in the city now want to stone David. It seems they're blaming him for his loss. Mind you, these are his friends. These are not his enemies. These are not strangers. These are his fellow soldiers. These are people in his neighborhood, his workmate, and the guy who speaks good of him when they're getting coffee. His shopkeeper, the guy from whom he buys halloumi. The Uber taxi driver who takes him to see his beloved wife. And, the old man next door who tells him stories over and over again. The guy who does a pedicure for his beloved Abigail. So this is the people who are trying to stone him. Imagine how much it would cut to the heart. So what did David do? David turned to the Lord, and he found his strength in the Lord. Because in the midst of crisis, he remembers he's God. He doesn't seek revenge. He probably doesn't even hold a grudge, because he knows people who are distressed, and distressed people sometimes do things that are terrible. So why does David turn to the Lord? I think that's what we're coming to. And he comes to the Lord and he remembers the Lord because God has been faithful. And faithfulness means sticking at it no matter what. If you think about it, David is not angry. He's not asking God, where were you? Aren't you supposed to protect me? As you promised, I've put my trust in you. It wouldn't have happened if you were here, if I was here to protect them as soon as I live. It's like you turn your back on me, and what happened? So why was David faithful to God? You see, the interesting thing about this story is that this story is a climax of sorts. It happened after so many things had happened to David, and by this time, so some of the things that had happened to David, if you'd like to know the background, some of the stories from David are taken right from 1 Samuel chapter 10 all the way to where we are. So there's about 20 chapters, and what had happened is, so King Saul, who was the first king, had been anointed king, and he had been declared the first king by the prophet Samuel, hence the name of the book. Saul eventually was rejected by God as king, and this really started in 1 Samuel 13. Then God chose David to replace Saul, and David was a mere shepherd. He was the last born son of a man called Jesse, and no one really thought much of him, not even his father, and even his brothers despised him. So then David slew Goliath, and God gave him a victory. And so, many of you are probably familiar with the story of David slaying Goliath. So this is quite early on. So this is around 1 Samuel chapter 17. So then after David slew Goliath, David actually became famous. He became a superstar. People were singing songs about him. So they said, for example, that Saul had slain thousands and David had slain tens of thousands. And by the way, these are women who are singing. Women are always getting guys into trouble. That's a joke. So anyway, because of this, King Saul started becoming jealous of David, and now he wanted to kill him. So eventually, David had to run, and he spent many years running from town to town, from village to village. He even was eventually living in caves. Now, twice, King Saul was in David's hand, and David had the power to kill King Saul, but he spared his life. So eventually, the pressure of running from Saul became too much. Now, David ran to the Philistine country. Now, if you remember, when David slew Goliath, Goliath was a Philistine, so David is running into exile to the very people who were his enemies. And he lived there for a while, I think it was about 1 year, and he became a marauder, he became a mercenary, and he even attacked his own country. So basically, David has chained loyalty from his home country. And now, the backdrop to the Ziklag story is that there was a decisive battle that was coming up. The Philistines were going to fight against the Israelites. So David wanted to fight against Israel, his home country, on the Philistine side. Now, the Philistines refused because they had remembered the story. They said, isn't he the one who they sang songs about? Saul has slain thousands and David has sung tens of thousands. So they refused. So it is while David has gone and he's gone to the battle line and he's been rejected at the battle line, and then he comes home and he finds, while he's gone, that his hometown has been attacked. So basically, that's the background. So the background to faithfulness is that really bad things happen to good people, even those who were anointed by God. And in the case of David, he had been promised to become king, but things, instead of becoming better, actually, they became worse. Instead of becoming king, David is actually running for his life. He's lost his family and his friends. And so faithfulness means the one you trust, who is God. You know that he will come through, and he will remain faithful to you until the end. And you do not give up, because the testing of your faith produces perseverance, and perseverance and endurance leads to life. And so David had been through this all, and he knew that his Redeemer lives. And he knew probably that because Job had suffered and been faithful, and this is what Job had said, I know that my Redeemer lives, and he shall stand at last on the earth. And after my skin is destroyed, this I know, that in my flesh I shall see God. So you see that one statement that I made, that was in the Bible, that but David strengthened himself in the Lord his God, means so much. It is a declaration of faith. It is basically David who's declaring that despite whatever is going on in his life, he will remain faithful. Where else was he going to go? Because, the Lord had the words of eternal life, and that's who he had to put his trust in. That's really what I believe caused David to, amongst others, incorporate the following words in his famous psalm, which you might know. This is Psalm 23. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. David knew that problems come for sure, but God is with you in the troubles. He's right there with you. He's going to redeem you, so trust in him. Believe in him even if you cannot see him, for God blesses those who believe in him without seeing. In fact, you cannot become God's friend, as David was, unless you believe without seeing. Now that's faith, and that's being faithful. So, exercise for you. It's your turn. What will you do differently now that you know about faithfulness? The examples you could think about. How has God been good to you in both the good and the bad times? In what ways have you been unfaithful? How can you change that? Third homework for you is, what do you think happened to David shortly after this? Hint, it was good stuff. Be blessed. If you'd like a prayer, let me know. If you'd like to know more about this series that we cover, the details at the bottom of this video.